There, the image is there. I think most of us can probably relate to it. For me, it was just that daily feeling of, I'm taking hits through the day. By the time I get home at the end of the night, for the real battle, if you want to say, I feel like I'm down and out, and I feel like I'm ready to throw in the towel. That's kind of where this kind of originated from, and I think it's something that most men relate to.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it was a brilliant piece of writing that's really helpful. That is, as Ben said, really easy to relate to as a man. I think the thing that really struck me about this, sometimes when I pray, I think that like I don't know what I'm doing. Like sometimes it's like I'm just maybe just talking to a friend of or
Mm,
God, or I have to say something in a holy way, or
mhm.
sometimes prayer feels like I'm just like sitting having tea with Jesus or something
Right.
like that, and it's like
Oh, yeah.
not like maybe I'm not sure what I'm doing, or why I'm doing it, or if I'm doing it right.
Mm,
But this analogy of the fight and Jesus being our true coach, I just had a pure vision of Jesus being our corner man in the boxing ring.
mm.
And after every round, we go out and do our thing. We go out and give and get punched. And then when we hear that bell, we go back into the corner, and he's there to give us encouragement, to
Mhm.
stitch us up, give us some words of encouragement or advice. If we think about prayer, or I mean, for me, if I think about prayer like that, where Jesus is my corner man
Mm.
and I got to go do my life, and I come back and I'm talking to him like that, and that's what he's there for. For me, it really revitalizes
Mm.
my approach to prayer and the reason and what I'm accomplishing. And it just made me excited
Mm.
to,
Wow. Yeah.
adventure into prayer in that method. Yeah.
Wow.
Fantastic. Right. It's interesting to me as I listened to this presentation of the fight that we just heard. I wrote a book for our Oaks Men's Group, and one of the topics in the book is male significance. Here's what I wrote. It says, "So, how are the men you know doing in the significance department? Many men are in a battle for their significance, but are not sure how to fight this battle. The significance we need is threatened and weakened. We feel defeated. Our significance is taking a beating while we try to figure out how to hold on or hold our own in the ring. A man doesn't go down without a fight, but many of us are hanging on the ropes. If a man's heart is not strong, he will wear down and slump to the canvas in defeat. That's why we created Oaks. Men need to understand their battle. What is this fight about? And who am I? And what am I here to accomplish? We need to know as men. The point is, we are created and called to male leadership, and that's where the fight is. Yeah, in any fight, we need to know who the opponent is and how he attacks and how we can best fight him. Ultimately, as the audio pointed out, the opponent is Satan and the powers of evil in the dark world we live in. We also know Satan can disguise himself in different ways. We might think the opponent is our wife at times, or our boss at work, or our kids, or sometimes even God. In the end, our opponent might just be ourselves.
For me, it's funny when you mentioned there about, sometimes the confusion of who the opponent is, right?
Mm.
And if you kind of link it to this idea of being in a boxing ring, although I've never been in one, but I can imagine by the fifth or sixth round, things start getting blurry, things start getting confusing, right? You've seen some of those video clips where there's a boxer and he gets so dazed
Mm.
that
Yeah.
he's like looking at the referee. He thinks that's the one who he's fighting against, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's very true in our life that um, we feel like that. Sometimes it is. We get home, there's one little comment from our wife,
Mm.
and it feels like, oh, you're the one that I'm in the battle with now,
Right.
right? Or a friend or whatever it may be. But I think that's very true of what we're talking about here.
Is a fascinating concept to me. Many times in the struggle of marriage, it's very obvious that it feels like the fight is against your wife.
Mm-hmm.
And you have very real fights, right? And sometimes they knock us out. And with the failures of marriage, it seems like that's a pretty common occurrence, right? For men to get knocked out. But it's weird that often we're really fighting ourselves more often than not. right? With our own, like, temptations or weaknesses or laziness or whatever. And, the third thing there where it says like, or even God,
Mm-hmm.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, that concept is a interesting thought. Jacob struggled with God, which was like some sort of fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know how that would look or how often, or if we're supposed to engage in that too, right? If we're supposed to struggle with God, and we're definitely fighting against the devil. So it's kind of who we're fighting against. And I mean, interestingly, with the adequate adversary or something like that, someone that challenges you, through that struggle
Mm-hmm.
to kind of be your best or to overcome challenges, right? So what I find so fascinating is that this piece of writing here really focuses in on the daily fight of the day to day, right? The come home from work, and do you go and sit on the couch and talk for 5 minutes, or do you retreat? Or it seems like our fight or our challenge as men in this marriage context or family context is over the little things. So when I hear this Ephesians 6, we're fighting not flesh and blood, but powers and principalities and all these miraculous things, like as if we're in the battle of Revelation, trying to stop the mark of the beast from happening in our efforts. But like, what does victory look like? It almost seems like it's like the victory or the battles to do those little things, to have a successful going out and coming in, goodbye, I love you, or hey, welcome home, or to have a nice meal, or to do a small act of kindness or relational act.
Right.
Go to sleep at the end of the night, which is kind of that peace, right? Like just that rest, right?
Yeah.
There's something to each of those types of fights, right? And we have to know who we're fighting, what we're fighting for, and if we're
how to win
and how to win,
how to
right?
win, right?
And it's definitely a challenge, because it doesn't feel like that's like a prize fighter's victory. Like, you don't feel like you can put on the championship belt after just putting your arm around someone and saying I love you, or giving someone a small little token of appreciation.
Right.
But those little things are what add up to victory, right? It's not necessarily the knockout punch that's like the trip to the Caribbean or whatever, right?
Right.
So it's a challenge to keep things in perspective, right? What victory,
how to win. I mean, that's again, I think a feeling that probably most men listening to this is going to relate to. I think it was in the writing. It was, the crowd leaves the building, the lights go down, and here you are with another loss under your belt, right? And how many nights have we felt like that? Wife and the kids go to bed, we're sitting there, and whether it's the battle that has taken place throughout the day before us, or whether it's the temptation that we're facing, whatever it may be, the truth is often we're sitting there in the dark or lying in bed in the dark thinking maybe tomorrow, right? Maybe tomorrow I'll win the fight, right? So it's interesting.
Well, I'm wondering if we should wind this up and talk a little bit about the coach and how the coach helps us to win this battle, so we can finish this podcast on a winning note. Just listening to what we're saying, it sounds to me like this fight is real, and it's every day, and it's tough, and there's defeat, and there's sometimes we get angry, sometimes we fight, and sometimes we flight, sometimes we just check out. And so, what is the answer? What do we need to do? What is the coach doing for us? What does he ask us to do to get back in the fight and to be victorious, as Paul talks about in Romans 8, about the fact that we are overcomers in Christ. I was thinking about Paul when he's writing the last chapter of Ephesians, chapter 6, and it says this, starting in verse 10, Ephesians 6, it says, "Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. That sounds like a battle. It sounds like a huge fight. And that's what Paul tells us that's really going on here, that we are battling and the Lord is battling with us. And the enemy is the devil and the powers of darkness and rulers and authorities of the unseen world. So when we come home at night and we're tired and maybe disappointed sometimes after a day of work, uh, it's I think important to have even these words in our hearts and minds: "Be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power."
Looks like.
Yeah, but back to your question on the coach, Dave, and I think you alluded to it earlier, that imagery of like the corner man.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, because a fight isn't 12 rounds all at once,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and then pack it in and go home. There's those little spots throughout the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's split up into 12 rounds where you retreat back to your corner, right? And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're talking about here with the armor, is those little moments where we go back, our corner man, Christ, tightens up our gloves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you said, he throws the Vaseline on the face if there's a bit of blood coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of gives us a push, or gives us that kind of little motivation that we need to stand back up and go back in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so back to what you're saying there, Daryl, like those little things, but maybe those little things, in between those little things, it's stepping back and just getting that coaching or that guidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find this really encouraging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only the corner man analogy and changing my approach to prayer, but just focusing on victories in those little things.
We're going to get losses, right? We're going to have those days where we lose, right? The important thing is, and when you look at those big names in boxing, if we want to kind of stick with this analogy, you know, they all have the wins, they all have the losses, but it's the ones that went the distance, right? It's the ones that came out at the end, with maybe more wins than losses, but more so just the ones that kept going and kind of had that many fights under their belt, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just, as you're talking, guys, I'm thinking about our wives and we as husbands and the marriage. For those of us who are married, there is our part, and we're talking rightly so about our part. I think we also need to be able to speak with our wives about our needs and wants, and as men, and what that means. And one of the things we have to recognize about our wives is they've never been a man, so they don't really understand us, and vice versa. And so I think it's important that we, in this battle and fight, that we kind of recruit our wives too to be part of that. And I'm thinking about the time when we come home after work. We mentioned that, and that seems to be a critical time in our coaching of marriages. That seems to be a very critical time in marriage, when the husband, if he's gone out working, and of course wives work as well, but the idea being that we both come home from work, maybe, or one of us does, and the wife greets us, whatever it may be, that there's a critical time there, and we need to really, I think, understand what we've been through. We've been through 8 or 9 or 10 hours of living in this dark world, and we're not at our best, and we need to be able to talk to each other as a couple, just about how to be kind to each other, and give each other, cut some slack, whatever it is, because that's where the enemy can get into our marriage right there. So just at critical times, certain critical times in the day, after work, before dinner, in the evening, before you go to bed, just making sure that you're spending time together, just talking through the day and praying together about the day, thanking God for the good things, praying for things we need to pray about, just connecting. And
Dave, it's interesting, like as far as recruiting our wives into this battle, or to the understanding, we need to do what we have to do, and we have to bring what we have to bring to the marriage. But there's things that we need too. And it's interesting. I asked my wife, I said, something really important to me is when I come home from work, I'd love for you to like come and greet me at the door and just give me a hug and kiss and be like, hey, welcome home.
Right.
And for the longest time, it didn't happen. And it's like, I think it's fine, because it's kind of probably normal for that not to happen. Right. Yeah. But just recently, my wife has been doing that. Wow. Right. Cool. So I walk in the door, and I think she did it kind of half jokingly and, having fun with it. But she came up, big smile, big hug, welcome home, right?
Wow.
And afterwards, like I was like, oh, that was great. And she was like, I was faking it, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. It was great. But what I'm getting at is like, when that happened,
Mm-hmm.
the entrance to the boxing ring, right? When the guy comes in, he's got his special
Mm-hmm.
jacket on, the special music,
Yeah.
the crowds.
Yeah.
That's how that made me feel, right? Like I'm walking into the ring and I've got that appreciation, and then it kind of really directs your energy and attitude and enthusiasm for the rest of the fight that's
Right.
going to ensue, right? So that's kind of what you were talking about there, Dave, and it worked.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. That's good. That's great news. And it's amazing how little things, but Ben was talking about little things. It's amazing how these little things are so important in our encouragement as husbands, and then we feel like God's on our side and our wife's on our side, and we can, kind of really get up for the next round.